Hello, everybody. I'm Lucas Kendall. This is my friend Charlie Vignola, and we are back.
Hey, gang.
This is our screenwriting talk show that we were doing last spring and last summer. And then we took a break for a bunch of reasons, one of which Charlie had some family matters, some of them sad, and so we understand that. And then we were just saying I had a technical problem where I thought we were recording and it didn't record. So it's like I've been doing the technical part of the show, and I haven't been able to get more than a few hundred people to watch this, which I understand because people are busy. We're talking heads. We're not famous, and people want to watch Star Wars. They don't want to watch this. I understand, and we don't have the audio podcast only version, which I need to figure out technically.
We're working on that though, so that's coming up.
We're not. That means I'm supposed to.
We means Lucas is figuring out the tech problem.
I'm supposed to do it, and I keep on not doing it because it just looks like. But we wanted to get together and talk because we enjoy it, and we sort of miss it, and we miss each other.
Yeah.
So we're back.
It's been a while, and as Lucas said, the holidays went by, and it's already February 1st. The new year is coming up quick. And, Lucas has been working on some material screenwriting wise. So have I. And so we could talk a little bit about that. We could talk about the Oscar nomination.
You said before we started, do you want to talk about Top Gun Maverick and how I was on the development? I was like, well, it sounds like you do.
That was a kind of a pleasant surprise on the morning of the Oscar nominations was Top Gun Maverick, which was the last film that I worked on and helped develop that Jerry Bruckheimer Films got a bunch of Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, I believe Best Song, Lady Gaga song. Anyway, it was kind of exciting that my final project for Jerry was so roundly recognized by the Academy. And you never know. Like, again, this is an odd year if you look at some of the nominees in terms of what got not. Last couple of years have been odd since COVID. But generally speaking, like the big crowd-pleasing films don't always win the top prize, but sometimes they do. Titanic did. So occasionally they do. You never know. I'm not sure what people are considering the front runner this particular year, but Top Gun Maverick was not only really enjoyed by audiences, but very enjoyed by critics and did very, very well, like record setting, in fact. So that was nice. And I know Jerry is very happy about getting his first official Best Picture nomination, which means that at this point in his career, he can finally say, yep, I'm an Oscar nominated producer, along with all the other accolades. And it's just another interesting thing in that it took a long time to develop the script for Top Gun Maverick. I mean, we were really working on it for well over 15 years in various iterations. Yeah.
Tell us about like how many were there like 5 wholly different versions of it?
Yeah. I mean, again, a whole variety of writers worked on it over the years, and the focus was different from draft to draft.
Sometimes, what can you say? What were some of the focuses?
One of the big themes, it was only touched upon in the final movie, but one of the big pivot points in one of the early drafts was the transition from like manned aviation to drones. That was something that was more front and center of one of the drafts that we did. So there was a pilot who piloted the drones that was sort of one of the kind of, I wouldn't say antagonist, but was somebody who bumped up against Maverick, who's the guy who actually flew planes, and this kind of like video game jockey guy who flew the drones, who thought what I do is just as important as what you do, even though I'm doing it from the safety of a trailer in Nevada, that kind of thing. Also in some drafts, Maverick was having sort of what do they used to call it, a May-December relationship. And he was an older pilot, and he was having a relationship with one of the younger female pilots that he was training. So an inversion of the romance that was in the initial film, with him being the older member of the duo.
Pre-Me script?
Were those good scripts?
Was that a pre-Me Too script?
Oh yeah, definitely a pre-Me Too script. Yes, that was.
And the other pilot he was involved with was a woman?
Yes, it was a woman in the program that he was working with. Yes, it was. Then there were many drafts where the emphasis was not on Goose's son. And obviously, like when you look at the movie now, you're like, how could the movie
So
not do that?
who was the first person who said, "Why isn't this about Goose's son"?
I think we were listening to various pitches, and it kind of occurred to all of us that like that's a pretty obvious bit of drama to mine. Maybe like some would say, well, isn't that predictable? Oh, it's predictable that it's going to be Goose's son, and he's going to be the surrogate father. It's like, yeah, but that's good if you do it well. It's like it's pretty dramatic, and again, it went through tons of development over the decade and a half that we were developing the script, and obviously Miles Teller did a really good job in the role. Really kind of captured the Anthony Edwards energy that was
Yeah,
important.
yeah, I thought the casting was just spectacular. It was a real treat.
Yeah, and again, I think at the end of the day, there's like three credited writers on the screenplay, but a lot of the production rewrites were done and supervised by Chris McQuarrie, who's Tom's partner on all the Mission Impossible movies. He came on board and helped a lot in revisions. And the other thing that helped the movie, which is an anomaly, and it only happened like COVID was a blessing and a curse for the movie, right? It was a curse
Yeah.
because it delayed the release of the film 2 years, and there was a large possibility it wasn't going to be released theatrically. Like nobody even knew if theatrical was a thing anymore. Tom, to his credit, um, categorically refused to have Paramount send it directly to streaming. He wanted to. He was one of the few people who actually could make the argument for like theatrical experience is worth fighting for. I do not want to release this movie, and you're not going to piss off Tom. So that was one thing. And then because it took several years to get back to the point where the movie can be released theatrically, that gave us more time to tweak the film and improve the film and revise the film in a
What was
way that
something
like
that got, what was something that got revised? Can you say?
well, for example, the whole romance with Jennifer Connelly, that whole subplot in the movie was heavily revised and reshot.
In what way?
And in what way? It was just like again, they felt like the early versions of it just weren't working as dramatically strong as they thought they could get to. And again, Tom is, if nothing, like a stickler for improving. And so when we saw cuts and we saw the footage over the development and the post production process, it was like, well, we have the time, we have the money. Like let's reshoot, rewrite, and reshoot.
All right, so this must have been a reshoot because it's the best scene that makes that subplot work.
Yeah.
He escapes out the window and the kid catches him.
Yeah.
And it's a reversal, then the kid already knows.
Yeah.
It's a great
That
scene.
was, yeah, no, you're right. And that was one of those things. So there were, and the football, what was the football scene on the beach? They reshot that, at least once. Yeah. And so
Can I make fun of this, how gay this movie is?
you can do whatever you like here.
All right, audience. So I wrote this on my blog. All right, 25 years ago, I'm taking a college course is about music and gender in film. And one of the things the professor, who's a really smart guy, shows us is Top Gun and the rock music and the volleyball scene. And it's the Quentin Tarantino thing from that movie where he says Top Gun it's the gay analysis of Top Gun.
Right.
So it's not like I'm making this up. So anyway, it was something that at the same time I learned from my college professor saying like, get a load of this. And it's, once it's there, and if you have any experience with cultural criticism, you're like, oh yeah, this is really gay. And it was screaming at me that way watching the sequel. And it's funny. They're aware of it.
It's funny because like, again, since I do know all the players, like the homoeroticism of the first movie, that is entirely subconscious. That is not a conscious, deliberate thing at all. It's
but
just
you also
like,
can't deny that once
no, I mean the read of it is obvious.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like the people who made the movie, it's not like, oh, we're going to be clever and we're going to put some subversive No,
yeah.
That was not anybody's. But yes, it was sort of like, yeah, I guess subtextually it's there and it's a valid. I wouldn't even say it's a critique so much as an observation of the original film, but it's definitely incidental or accidental, not deliberate.
Right, and
That it was,
that's why the
yeah,
Jennifer Connelly subplot is so important because it grounds. It's like screaming, "Don't worry, it's straight. It's straight. I promise you, Middle America, you love this movie," which they do. And I
yeah.
understand they're like, "Don't worry, don't worry. They're all straight because these
But
guys."
it's but but it's also, it's the thematic, the relationship between the two of them is like, it's mature and it's grounded and it's much different than the original film. And frankly, when you're talking about these sort of sequels to legacy movies, whether we did it with Top Gun, the Bad Boys movies, and just now finishing up Beverly Hills Cop 4, which will be on Netflix later on, all these movies, because the actors are 20, 30 years older than they were in the original roles. That's sort of the idea of the theme of senescence and getting older, and looking back, and all that has to be dealt with. If you do it right, it's dealt with in a smart way, in a good way. And I would argue that for both Bad Boys for Life, the last movie, and Top Gun Maverick, it was well done. We did a pretty
It
good job.
really was one of the best sequels that I've seen. Yeah, that
And
it,
and by the way, again, looking at all the different iterations we did over time, it and it would have been really easy for it not to have been, the movie that it ultimately came out to be. And it was only by virtue of the long path to production, which I know we talked about in previous shows, but it's like nothing happens fast in Hollywood. Every one of these movies, like right now, Jerry is stepped up production, feature films, TV. But the origin of every one of those projects, whether it's, with TV, it's different because TV, there's like a cycle every year, or, there's new shows coming online. But feature films, every one of these movies that's going into production now, or that came out over the last few years, are the product of a decade or longer development, from hey, let's do this movie, to the movie finally coming out. It's just the reality. If you think that it moves much faster than that, it almost never does. It's always very long, and it's frustrating, which is the reason why you constantly need to be working on new material, because it's sort of like the things you forgot about are the things that are now getting made. I have a friend, Braggy Shoot, who he has a number of produced credits and TV credits, but a movie that he wrote, it's got to be almost 20 years ago, is just going to be coming out this year. Like it was based on like one of the passages of the original novel Dracula, about the transport of Dracula's coffin to London, and all the tragedies that befell that that trip. And he wrote it a million years ago, and it got set up and it got revised. At one point, it wasn't about Dracula anymore; it was about an alien. It like went through all this stuff, and it's like, well, whatever. It's in the rear view. I'm working on all this other new stuff, and then, just as fate would have it, the last couple of years, a new hot young foreign director took a fancy to it and revisited it, and he found out, oh, Amblin's making it. And it's actually going to be coming out in 2023. And like, oh, I forgot almost all about that movie because I worked on so many other things. But like, it'll be coming out next year, so it's a new quote unquote movie. But the seeds were planted decades ago. You know.
it all. That's what I. One thing I've learned is that the entire business comes down to, it's just people sending things to other people, going, "Do you like it?" That's all it is. It doesn't
It's
matter.
literally all it is.
It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter how rich they are. It doesn't matter how famous they are. It
Yeah.
still comes down to somebody deciding, I like this enough to give it to somebody else and say, do you like it too?
But
And
that's
that's
why
all
it's
it is.
literally like throwing darts. It's
Yeah.
like you have to find the person who responds. And literally 99 people could say no, but if the right one says, I kind of like this, I kind of think this is cool, well, then that quirky, weird, script that you wrote, it might land. But just know the passage, or the journey, is going to be long. Likely, it's going to be very long, and you just can't have the one thing in the hopper. You have to have many things in the hopper, because of the sort of staggered, attenuated timeline that anything winds up getting sold or produced. And that's a lesson when you're young and you're just starting out, or maybe if you're not young, you learn. It's like Lucas and I both belong to a Facebook screenwriting group where there's young writers, aspiring writers, older writers, and occasionally somebody be like, oh, I just finished the screenplay and I just sent it in and I posted it to a site, and just like, I'm a failure because nobody's responding to it. It's like, well, how long, when did you finish it? How long has it been on the site? A couple of months. It's like, come back to me in a decade. Like, I mean, that's not enough time. That is very impatient. But I guess if you don't know the sort of the reality of how long any of this stuff takes, you could think, well, it's not happening fast enough. I better go be a carpenter or something else, because the timeline, you have a skewed sense of what the reality of the timeline is
Then
for. Yeah.
when it rains, it pours.
Yes, that's the other thing, right? Sometimes it just, everybody's suddenly responding to your material at the same time, even though you wrote things over 3, 4, 5 years. Then you're on a roll, and sometimes that happens.
Yeah,
That's what you have to hope happens.
but
Um,
it still comes down to somebody liking
Always. It
it.
only it's only ever about somebody liking it.
Yeah.
Somebody has to champion and advocate that thing in a production company or a studio, which is a risky thing. If you're like a young executive, or if you're working at a studio, you don't want to advocate for something that people reject all the time, because then it looks like you don't know what you're talking about. So it's always a risky proposition to put yourself on the line for a piece of material. But at the same time, if you don't do that, nothing ever gets made. Now, this is one of the reasons why the things that do frequently get made are like, you know, sequels, intellectual property based on comics or books. These are kind of insurance policy pre-sold things where you're not really putting that much on the line to say, hey, we should do this million selling, best selling book, or this like legacy comic book character, because it's like, well, that's a no-brainer. Great, you found one that somehow nobody has strip mined yet, and so it's easier for you. But if it's an original, if it's an oddball movie, like, again, if it's Juno or The Black Swan or Heathers, or like one of these movies that's really off the beaten path, you do need an advocate, and you do need uh, patience, because none of those movies like immediately get made. I mean, that takes, it's a real labor of love. Um, I have a project I'm developing with a producer. I wrote it in 2018, I think. It's 2023, so that's 5 years ago. And it doesn't even feel like that long ago, but that's half a decade. And we're still out there sending it to studios, streamers, production companies, managers, actors, trying to put together a package, because the producer I'm working with, who is also a friend, uh, believes in it that much, that he's just like, well, I don't know why people don't see what I see in this, but my God, I just love this so much that I'm going to continue sending it out there as many times as I have to, because there's turnover at production companies and studios, and hopefully eventually there'll be somebody somewhere who sees the potential in this idea that I do and will respond to it. If you don't have that drive and that patience, and if you can't do that, then the movie will never get made. If you're not fighting for that movie to get made, it's not going to just
We gotta get,
jump
I
off the
gotta get
shelf.
people, you can't, it doesn't do any good to fight for something that doesn't have the merit to mean anything.
Yes, yes, but that's the thing. Like, it's so rare to find something that you love, and fight for. Like, again, I in the 32 years that I worked for Jerry, like, there weren't tons, hundreds, thousands of projects that you just love and fight for and try to get made, because it's rare to find great material. I mean, as
It's
much
all
as we all,
about making somebody feel something.
it's all about that. And it's like, again, it's about that ineffable quality of something that you're like, I there's something really great here. Now, sometimes maybe that material won't get made right away, but the writing will get the writer work. It'll be a writing sample, and it will get them meetings on a project that's maybe better known, and that'll happen. And then later on, the project that they got the work off of, it's like, oh, nobody ever made that. Well, now you have enough juice, and enough successful films that, like, let's go and we'll make that project now. And they're not always hits. I mean, a lot of the movies, as that are on the blacklist, right, are all these weird, dark, quirky movies, and because they suddenly get on the blacklist, they get made. But, like, I guarantee, if you look at the movies that were produced from the blacklist, and you look at the box office of movies that were made from those, they're not all Avatar Way of
We
Water,
should
folks.
say that the blacklist is this annual list of best unproduced screenplays that the executives vote on. and there's usually like 70 of them a year, maybe 10% of them and fewer, I would think, ends up getting made. And some of them
Yeah,
were going to get made anyway.
but they're also the thing about there's two blacklists, and if
Yeah.
you're an aspiring screenwriter, you might conflate them, but they're not the same thing. There's the original blacklist, which is studio executives to production company executives like myself are asked, what are some great scripts you've read over the past year, and we provide our picks, and then they do a master list of like which of those screenplays got the most recommendations from studio executives, and they rate
Right.
them from
But a few.
most to least. That's one.
I think people are working the refs, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure of course it's political. So there's that. That's the blacklist that
And
people
there's the
think of.
consumer.
Right. So you want to explain what the blacklist consumer website is and how that
Yes,
works?
it consumes your money.
That's the headline. But yes, beyond the blacklist, that is studio executives telling people these are the scripts that I like. And by the way, those are all already represented people.
Yeah.
Right.
The same outfit has a consumer website where you spend $100 and somebody will read and review your script and give it a number from 1 to 10. If you get an 8, 9, or 10, 10's never happened, then they put it on their mailing list and it gets tweeted about.
Now, yeah,
Nothing happens.
That is how the blacklist actually makes money, because you don't make money from creating the blacklist every year. That doesn't pay the bills. But what the blacklist does is they're not the only game in town, are they, Lucas? The blacklist consumer site is not the only site that offers young, aspiring, and promising screenwriters a path to have their material evaluated.
I have the cheat code to the blacklist.
Okay, go for it.
For the consumer website, the cheat code is diversity.
Okay.
And this is something, we're two white guys talking. So I'm speaking this completely objectively. Do we even say this? Because I always feel like I'll get in trouble. Anyway,
couch it in the nicest, most politically correct way possible.
The most politically correct way is that Charlie and I are lifelong liberals who support diversity.
Yes.
As a matter of analysis, I have determined that a preponderance of the scripts that get tweeted about and get the 8 or above by the blacklist have a strong element of diversity in the characters, in the storylines, in the cultures, which is commendable. But I also sincerely think that what's happening is that the readers are not qualified enough to actually determine what is a good script and what is great writing. And they are falling back upon their ability to recognize what is virtuous because they don't know how to recognize what is actual good writing.
And that's one version of how you get on the blacklist. Another version of how you get on the blacklist. Again, this is the.
I was speaking of the consumer website.
You're talking about the consumer website now. Okay, I was going to say.
The consumer website.
All right.
The real blacklist is the real blacklist seems to be a preponderance of. There's like 3 or 4 management companies where it's their aggressive strategy to promote, to try and break new writers by getting them on that list.
But generally speaking, the subject matter of the blacklist, not the consumer part, but the industry, these are the scripts I liked, are dark, quirky, offbeat, either true stories. Dark, quirky, offbeat seems to be the general. Yeah, it's things that are sort of like more interesting, offbeat, quirky, dark, which is the reason why a lot of those movies that wind up getting made from the blacklist recommendations are not always big box office.
And there's some flat out what they call stunt scripts, like people writing things to which they would never get the music rights or they never get the license. And it's just a writing sample. No, but I wanted to be clear, super clear, because I'm taking a risk in saying that about the consumer blacklist website, is that it is natural when there are more and more diverse writers who are trying to break in that they write about stories, true to themselves, and that's all great. I just have noticed, and I've submitted a bunch of stuff myself. I've gotten an 8 once.
Right.
The same script, the same script will get a 7, which means nothing, and then it'll get an 8, which means you get a little tweet. It's like, that's the difference? And there's no science to it. There are people who go on, the screenwriting Facebook groups and go, oh, I had a 7, but I had an 8 for concept. I'm so close. I'll rewrite and submit it. Just really don't. Don't.
Just that number rating system, and just like, again, the graphs and the
Wait,
percentages,
weren't we
and
talking to Dan Seco?
yeah.
Did he say that on the air or off the air that he
I
used to
don't
read?
I don't remember now. I'm
Well, I don't
sorry.
want to throw Dan under the bus.
Bad memory.
He said he used to read for the Blacklist, and he said that it was very rare for him to give an 8 because you're sticking your neck out.
Yeah.
An 8 because if you give an 8, and this is another lesson in what it's like to be like the reader or the junior executive. If you stick your neck out and say this is good, and then the boss reads it and says,
This is crap.
you are in trouble. But if you give him a script and it's about virtuous subject matter, he might say this sucks, but you can say, yeah, but it's about this marginalized group, and nobody can quibble with that. That's true. So that's my theory, and this isn't even my theory. This is a screenwriter director named Tony Tost who wrote it on his blog, who just said that there are a lot of junior executives who champion virtuous material because nobody will dispute that. Nobody
Well,
will
okay,
dispute.
let's look at it head on, right? So in 2023, it's an advantage to have diverse characters and subject matter in your material if you're looking to get noticed, and maybe if you're looking to get sold, because there's never been so much diversity in entertainment, in films and television. This is a good thing. Now, whether or not you're doing it cynically, that's a different thing, right? If you're
I don't
basically,
think, no, I
now
don't
maybe
think,
some are, maybe some writers are, and maybe some executives are, but I'm not discounting that's
I don't
possible.
think, it's possible. I don't think it's consciously cynical that people are trying to do this. Oh, well, actually,
Well,
no, I won't say who it is, who wrote a script about a Latina girl coming of age.
right.
Maybe this guy has no, it was purely a play,
I'm not even sure if cynical is the right word so much as like, listen, if you're trying to sell a product,
Yeah,
you
right.
want to make the product as appealing as possible. So if you know that people in Hollywood are making more diverse material, if you're a smart writer, you might go, well, if I can choose to make it diverse or not diverse, if blue cars are selling and it doesn't matter what color the blue car is, right? The car is, why not make it a blue car if that's what's selling? Now, if you're doing it cynically, and some of my friends have pointed this out, which is, you're watching commercials now on television. It's like what you won't see is like a straight white couple in like a commercial anymore. And some people will say, what's that about? Well, because I don't know, for 100 years of TV and movies, it was only ever white straight couples, and now you're seeing like more diversity, which is a good thing.
I'm getting
um
scared, Charlie.
yeah, but
I'm getting
here's
scared that this is not going to look good for us.
no. But
Grumpy old white.
this is something that sort of, I think, like, Lucas and I are both like, white guys, straight white guys, and in an age of diversity, here's another question, which is, and it's very controversial. Should we be writing stories from perspectives not our own? There is some serious controversy and debate about this, which is, should I, a white guy, write a movie like Emancipation that Will Smith did? Am I allowed? Can I? Should I do that? In the old days, there was no question. In the old days, 30
On the
years
old
ago.
days, Mickey Rooney played a Chinese character.
Yeah.
But
By the way, the old days is 5 years ago, depending on your timeline. But
yeah, I just want to say emphatically, I have no comment.
but it is a question, and I noticed that, for instance, I have a 21-year-old daughter who just graduated from college, and we do get into these conversations where it's like, you shouldn't write something from a perspective that is not your own, whether it's a person of color, whether it's a gender issue. Like, should I write a story about a trans character as the lead character? Well, I'm not trans. I can do research, and I can talk to trans characters, and I can do an enormous amount of legwork to get into the head of the character, and that's what has historically been the way fiction writers write. It's like, I might not know everything about a soldier, but I can go and I can talk to soldiers and I can find out about that. But now there is a certain belief on the part of certain people that no, you shouldn't. You should not write those stories if you're not black, if you're not trans, if you're not a woman, if you're not handicapped. You shouldn't write stories where that's the lead character. That's not your story to tell. I disagree with that, but I understand the perspective. Um, for instance, I had a conversation with a friend's daughter who's about 22, and she was saying like a man should not write a story from a woman's point of view. Period. I said, okay, so like a movie like Terms of Endearment, which was based on a book written by a man, screenplay directed by a man. You don't like that movie retroactively? That movie's no good. It's just like no, like that. I personally don't think that that's fair. But she did, and she's entitled to her opinion. But like, I think that's where you start getting into this very weird territory
Yeah,
where you're trying to put handcuffs on people's imagination, and that is
ridiculous.
dangerous.
That's like saying James Cameron shouldn't direct Aliens and Catherine Bigelow shouldn't direct The Hurt Locker. It's just stupid.
Yeah, but that is a perspective. So it's like I couldn't say, "What are you crazy?" I can only write stories about 57-year-old Italian American white guys. Like that can't be the case. And so that's kind of an interesting topic. And I think again, just going back to the diversity thing, Lucas and I both are
I
bleeding
was
heart
just
Hollywood
trying to
liberal.
jump on that stupid ripoff website.
And we got off on this.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't use
so
that
okay,
website.
let's go back to All right, let's go back to that for a second. Okay, so the blacklist is part of the screenplay industrial complex, which we touch upon sometimes,
It's
but
out of
we don't
control.
talk about a lot.
It's out of
But it
control.
is a thing. It is a thing. If you are, and I understand it entirely. If you're an aspiring writer, doesn't live in Los Angeles, and you're trying to figure out how the hell do I get my material to be seen by people in LA because I don't live there geographically and I don't have any connections. My uncle is not a producer. I don't know anybody that works for the studios. How do you do that? I completely sympathize because every writer who comes out and wants to work in LA is starting from the same thing, which is I don't have any connections. I'm trying to make connections, trying to meet people at bars, at screenings. When the internet became a thing, online. My screenwriting teacher knows somebody who worked on a show, in the 70s. I can go talk to them.
Here's
You
the thing.
just try to make connections.
Everything turns on personal relationships. It's actually easier than you think to make personal relationships. All you have to do is write people or tweet to somebody that you like them, and then you're talking to them. It's really that
Yeah,
simple.
if they respond to you,
We
yes.
had Michael Lehman on this show because I loved his last show, and I sent him a fan letter to Twitter, and where he was, I just say I love your show, and we started chatting, and I invited him on, and we had a good hour talking to him. So it's actually not that hard.
It's not that hard it's not that hard if you're being like a nice, normal, decent person. It becomes a lot harder if you become an embittered, entitled, cynical
Yeah, but
person
that goes without
who,
saying. But
yeah,
the bigger point is that there is no utility to knowing anybody if your material is not actionable.
and that's the thing we were talking about off the air, which is how do you know when your material is ready to be submitted professionally? Because if you really only get one chance at a first impression, you want to put your best foot forward. But how do you determine what your best foot is? Now, the blacklist and the screenplay industrial complex that we're talking about purports to be one way to do that, which is you send us your screenplay, and for whatever it is, 50, 100, 200, name your price.
But and it does
Somebody,
it does work for
somebody,
me.
yeah, somebody's going to read your screenplay here. Usually somebody you don't know. Usually somebody whose identity is secret.
Oh, it's
Um,
absolutely somebody you want.
is going to read and evaluate your material and then give you feedback again based on some grid or percentage or number system or who the hell knows, uh, to let you know how good it is in comparison to, I guess,
Right.
everybody else.
And yes, the blacklist. And if you have something with a strong element, not just of diversity, but strong, virtuous liberal subject matter, speaking as a liberal, you have a better chance of having the reader elevated for the reasons I mentioned before. However, you you also have a likelihood of it being of no interest to anybody in the business because the people who use the blacklist are they're either looking for, a great voice, or more likely they're just looking for a cheap piece of genre material that they can sell. So you have people, the produce. Okay, so those are the two areas. The people who are using the blacklist from the industry are either, beginner managers or junior managers or manager assistants who have been given the mandate, find cheap talent that we can monetize. So they're looking for people who write, flashy, who feel hip, who have a command of the craft. And then that may be like a quarter of it. I would probably say more like 3/4 of it are producers with no money, who do not have the funds to develop a script. So if they can find a makeable script that's probably an inexpensive thriller, horror movie, maybe a grounded sci-fi, so not a space. They don't want your $100 million fantasy epic. They want your Black Mirror episode. So if they can find a script that then they can fix, because almost certainly it's got a lot of problems, then that's why they're using it. So if you're using the blacklist to write, historical fiction, historical drama, I don't think it's going to help. I mean, of course, there are exceptions where people fall in love with the voice, or people fall in love with the project, but more than likely, you will get, if you do get an 8, and I did get an 8, and then you get on their little weekly email list, and then you get tweeted about by them, it's just, it just doesn't matter. It does not matter, because those executives get an email with, these are the 10 scripts we like this week. And there might be one on there that sounds really cool. You are now in the equivalent of a dating website where it's just people swiping.
But you just brought up an educational
log lines. You do log lines.
Here's an educational point that he just brought up, and this is not just the blacklist, but whatever approaches the blacklist in terms of semi-legitimacy for these websites. You're going to be lucky to get an assistant to a manager or a super low budget producer calling you on your material from these sites. That's if you're lucky, because the people that work for, more, let's say, higher up in the business in terms of like executives, production companies, studios, they're not looking at these
No,
sites.
I told you.
They're definitely not looking at these
We
sites.
agree.
So this is the
level.
problem, though. This is the problem, which is, again, if you don't have any connections, how do you know that your material is ready to go?
You do not.
All those sites are ready to prey on you, because the vast majority of them are not people who work professionally in the business, have any connections. They might be misleading you in the sense that, like, well, this will be helpful because it's available to people in the business that they want to look at it. But I'm telling you, they're not looking at it. They're not. We're deluged with material at studios and production companies, legitimate producers, attorneys, agents and managers, lit publishers. Every day we've got spec scripts, articles, comic books, people who have the license, the movie license for Lionel Trains or Mad Libs. We've got just old TV shows. There's a million things that we have to look at every day. So no, we don't have the free time to go to some generic website where complete amateurs are sending the material in to be read by people who don't really evaluate material for the business. If you get an 8 or a 9 on some website that nobody uses or has heard of from somebody who doesn't work in the business, it doesn't matter. It might help your ego, and look, you're looking for any feedback and validation. I completely get that. I'm just saying, short of places like the blacklist, and even then, the people that are going to be looking at it are going to be nominal. Almost nobody else in that sphere who is like reading and evaluating your material is going to be your bridge to getting whether your material is ready to go, and B, get the bridge to hand it over to people in the industry. You still have to pay the way Lukas and I did, which is, reaching out to, like, you have the internet now. I didn't have the internet growing up. I had to write letters to agents and managers and filmmakers to see if anybody responded. So did Lukas, and they didn't all respond. Some people did, and you built on that. That's what you did. But how do you do that? How do you find people willing to read your material? It's hard because they're very
No,
busy and they're reading a lot of stuff.
I disagree. I have a different opinion.
You disagree? Okay,
I
go
think
ahead.
that having it's essential to get better as a writer, to get to the point where your material is actionable, where people want to pay you for it. You need a lot of practice, and an essential part of that practice is having readers read your stuff and give you feedback, because you need to train your brain to write things properly, to write things professionally, because probably your brain is writing things in a very amateur way, because that's the only way your brain knows how to do it, because you're teaching yourself how to do it. And when you're an amateur and you're teaching yourself, your brain is grabbing onto things that are easy, whereas the things that really move the needle and make a script really good and make people want it are harder. And they're harder, they're not necessarily technically harder, but they're emotionally harder, because you are so seduced by the ability that you can create worlds in your scripts that you forget that the emotions of your life that you are running away from to make the script are actually the things that you need to lean into to make the script good. I'm speaking as a real, as somebody who intends to be a real dramatic writer.
I'm confused. So what did you disagree with what I said?
I disagree that access is as important, or is even very difficult. So I disagree.
Wait. You're saying that if you have material that's ready to be sold, it's relatively easy to find people to read it? That's what you're saying?
It's easier.
That's not true.
Well, it's easier than people. It's really frustrating. But my advice to people is that don't spend $100 on the blacklist. Go to Fiverr.com, Fiverr.com. You can just type in script consultants. You'll find 40 of them, and you'll always find one or two people who are new who charge only $20, and they'll give it back to you in a week. Just buy 3 of them at $20 each. Probably these people are dumb. Probably their advice is not very good, but Charlie's blanching already because
here's what I would say, and I think Lukas would agree with this. The quality of your feedback matters. If you give it to 100 people and 100 people read your material, but there are 100 people whose opinions don't matter or you don't trust, that's a problem. You want to actually get feedback from people whose feedback means something, because they either can give you effective guidance and notes based on the fact that they are, people. Again, if you give it to your valet, if you're a screenwriter and you give it to the person who's driving your car, he's like, I don't even know the format, I don't know how to read a screenplay, I don't even like watching movies, that kind of thing. Whether he likes it or not, it doesn't mean your script's ready to go be sent to Jerry Bruckheimer Film. That's not the case.
Let me riff a little.
Yeah.
So at Fiverr, you spend $20 at Fiverr, you get something back that might be weird. It might have good points and bad points. The important thing you're doing is training yourself to even deal with the concept of feedback, to deal with the concept that you and your script are different things, and that the reader is something else, and that you are trying to transmit an entertainment experience to another human being. You are not just writing poetry. You have to get into the mindset of writing for an audience. You are not trying to make yourself cry. You are trying to make the audience cry.
Yes,
that's
true.
Not the same thing. You might cry at the same time, but you need to internalize, if I do this, an audience will be confused. So you need to stop your fingers from the crazy plot twist, the confusing mess, and of not even knowing who the protagonist is. You need to train yourself so that when you go from a concept to a story to a plot to actually writing it, it's clear. And a $20 Fiverr person, even if they're pretty dumb, will get you in the pattern and the habit of realizing that you can't just write anything you want and have people go, "Oh, what a genius." Because
probably, all right, well, again, we're talking about a couple of different things. One is being able to accept criticism and separating the work from yourself. That's one thing that you're talking about. That is true. That is true.
But we need to talk about that more, because people still don't get it. Because you
have to separate your ego from the material. That is one thing you have to do. But the other thing that's important is but who's reading your material and how they're giving you feedback, because that's the only thing that can help you. The natural inclination
Only if you're ready.
is I listen to people who tell me my material is good, and I wave away people who tell me my material is bad. That's human nature. You want to hear that your material is good. However, part of this process and part of making something genuinely better is working with somebody who can recognize and articulate to you, why isn't it working? Now, anybody can read it and go, I didn't like it. Why didn't I like it? I don't know. It wasn't my cup of tea. That doesn't help. You want to say, well, what is it about, if I'm writing a horror movie or if I'm writing a romance, specifically, where am I going wrong? And if it's just, again, some generic person on some generic website who's giving you feedback, the natural inclination is, if he's saying it's good, I listen. If he's saying it's bad, I'm not going to listen. But it matters who's giving you the feedback too.
Obviously, you're
Yeah.
trying. You're a script consultant. You're a paid script consultant. You cost a decent amount of money, and you're good at what you do.
I'm not cheap. No,
Well, you're not
I'm
cheap,
not.
but you are overqualified for probably 90% of these folks.
Yes, but one of the things that's important, and one of the things that I try to get across to somebody is that when have you crossed the threshold? When do you actually, and Lucas has talked about this on previous shows, which is, I finished something that I thought was ready to go. Now I'm going to use the connections I have to send the material out. But it's not ready to go. I think it's ready to go, but nobody else who's in a position to say, you know what, you need to fix this, you need to trim this is not working. Somebody who has actually done it for a living, who knows what professionally the bar is, that
Yes.
people above them are going to be grading you on. When you think you're ready at that point, which is, I've rewritten it, I've asked people, friends, whatever, to read it, I think it's getting ready to go out. It's closer to submitting to people. You really do want to get, um, you want to know how close you are, because if you're blowing it before it's ready, then people are not going to want to read your material again, because the first time you sent them something, it was so far from ready. I just know
And
this
this is
because
all true.
for 30 years that was the case. I read somebody's bad script and they're like, oh, wrote a new screenplay, it's much better. It's like, nope, because basically I already read it. I know you don't know when it's ready. So if you can do it, and it's not always easy, but if you can do it, you want to give yourself every single chance possible that before you submit it to, like you just said, I made a connection. I tweeted some screenwriter online. Aaron Sorkin responded back to me. Hey, I have a sabbatical coming up. I've got a month. I'm going to read somebody's script online. And somehow you connected to Aaron Sorkin. Is your script ready to go to Aaron Sorkin? Well, you might think so, but if you don't have some sort of person whose opinion you trust, who says, "Yep, it is. This is as good as you can get it at this point. I think that you've reworked it enough. You've made all these changes. It's ready to go." Then you should feel confident about sending it out to Aaron Sorkin. But most people don't know when you've reached that point, because it makes sense. How would you know? You're working in a vacuum and you're not in the industry. You don't know.
You know when let's talk about Top Gun Maverick. If you think that the important part of that movie for screenwriting purposes is all the jets and what they had to blow up, like, you're wrong. The important part of that movie is Iceman typing, "It's time to let go." It's the little girl saying, "Don't hurt my mom."
It's the emotional journey of the character and why you're telling this particular story, why this matters to this character at this
And
time.
what and
And
what when people start teaching to write, they're like, "Wait a minute, how long would it take for the jet to get there? And why would the jet drop the bomb? And do they have to have two people watching?" They're all obsessed with the mechanics, because the mechanics are like a jigsaw puzzle. It doesn't take any effort of your own heart. Whereas once you start getting into Iceman dying, the little girl getting older, it's like, oh, this is complicated. This is triggering me, because um, I'm trying to escape this. I'm trying to write my fantasy spaceship movie, because I don't
right,
have to face where I am in my life, or I do, or life is complicated, life is painful. All these things are emotional, and I think it's what somebody said about Sam Peckinpah, the great director and writer. He was like a dirty psychiatrist.
Hmm.
Just, he was a terror. He was, he would fire guns at the wall. Don't do this. But he had a great insight into what we now call toxic masculinity, even as he was also an example of it.
Right.
And, and it's all of the things that make your scripts actually get to the point where somebody important says, I want to make this, I want to give this to my agent, I want to say, hey, what can we do for this guy? It's
Right.
all about connecting to people's hearts and feelings, and it's intellectual, but that too. So I say just start spending $20 on people on Fiverr, or do swaps. It's even more free. It's free. Find other
Wait,
people.
what swaps?
Script swaps. Find people on Twitter and Reddit. There are hundreds of them, and say, hey, bro, I'll read your script and you read mine. And most of the time, you have to suffer through someone's terrible script. You get their notes back 5 weeks late, and it's not, it has a lot of drawbacks, which is why for me it's easier just to spend money. I used to do this, just spend $20 and you get it. But
Hmm.
just train yourself to the concept of iterations. You have to accept the very concept that I'm going to rewrite this 14 times. And when people get to your level, Charlie, where they're giving you something and spending, what is it, $600 or $300? What you ask a lot.
It depends on the service, but yeah, I
But
mean, it's
when they
like,
get
again, I'm not your cheapest option.
the mistake they make from you is that your note is probably, you're going to have a lot of notes. More than likely,
I'm very in depth. You get your money's worth.
I've been through your
Yeah.
you gave me a
Yeah.
freebie, and I was very impressed.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate that I had a piece of material that was very far along, because
Right.
I had already, you're probably going to be doing 4 or 5 page one rewrites for the first script that you write that anybody actually cares about. There's probably going to be 4 or 5 completely different iterations. And your mental and emotional toughness to go, that last version sucked, I'm going to do a completely new version because I now realize that there's a better way, and the better way is Y, whereas I thought the better way was X, but I was wrong because I knew nothing.
But part of the way that you find the better way is by having people read your screenplay who can
Yes.
articulate and direct you to
Yes.
find the better way that is in your blind spot. You obviously
And
didn't see it,
when
right?
the
So,
pupil is ready,
yeah.
the teacher will come, and a teacher
Yes.
will be useful. But if it's your first or second script, or if I try to tell people that it is emotion that is what moves the needle. The concept is the silver bullet to get people to want to sell it, but it's really the emotion that's the silver bullet to make people give you a career as a writer. And the first step is simple, which is simply to be interested in it. And
Well,
most people
yeah,
aren't interested.
all entertainment is a vehicle for emotion, right? Vicarious emotion, and that really is very clear when you're talking about genre, right? If it's emotion that is about love and romance, then it's about a romantic film. If it's about wanting to be scared, it's about horror or thrillers. If it's about wanting to be dazzled or spectacle, then it could be sci-fi or fantasy. And if it's about sort of working through trauma and wanting to feel like seen or identified, it could be a certain drama, a character drama, a character that you're going through. But it's always about tapping into some key emotional experience, exhilaration, or tragedy. Sometimes you're in the mood to see something that's you're connecting with on that level.
Right. And it's
So that's how you know if the film is good, right? Is
it's
if that
extrapolating human behavior in the wake of that emotion, and coming up with things that are new to find when the character goes in an unexpected direction when someone becomes happy from tragedy, or when they become depressed from something happy and they go, why am I feeling this way? I mean, why?
Well, yeah, because think about it. Like every movie starts out with a status quo, right? There's a character, and then there's a status quo.
I'm not even talking about structure, though. I'm talking about
No, no,
something.
no. I'm not talking about structure either. I'm just talking about like you don't start out. It's not about like you stay at one steady pace through an experience. You're starting with a normal state, and then you're going to a state of like fear or love or anxiety or exhilaration or whatever. You're changing the emotional state, and it's the development of that emotional state, like you're saying, through character interaction and behavior that provides the vehicle for that emotional release.
Yeah.
It all sounds very heady, but it's very simple, at the end of the day. And it's about you figuring out how to build that experience. And it takes time. It just takes time and experience
It takes
of doing it.
it takes training, and I continue to be like shocked and a little depressed that like 90 to 95% of what I see on the screenwriting groups on Facebook and on Twitter and Reddit is toxic. But in things like this, it's all business questions. It's all people's weird little. I noticed the 5 structures of this. It's like they're trying to analyze things that I don't know. Oh, let's make fun of this. Who is that guy you were making fun of?
Well, I don't want to.
You don't want to give him any advertising.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's. I'll hedge it and not use his actual name. Okay. I'll leave out the actual name. Coach, fill in the blank, Screenwriting Academy. So this is a fellow that I've seen online and fell down the rabbit hole one night of looking at his posts, and it's a fellow who runs a business where he sells, I guess, video modules telling you how to write a query letter, or how to write a certain genre or whatever. And he posts sort of communication with his graduates from his academy when they get sort of a response to a query letter. He gives out a diploma saying that you're an official professional screenwriter after the one-day boot camp course that he sells. And it was the kind of thing where I found it very amusing, but a little sad, because again, if you're a person who doesn't know anything about the business, and this guy, he's coming along and he's promising you the easy path to being able to be a professional screenwriter, and you might consider doing it. He was charging real money too. I was actually surprised, and
people will pay it. There's
he
some fallacy that if you make the price more expensive, people think it must be more valuable.
And there were a number of people who worked with him, and I was, again, I was amazed. Now, the thing, Lucas, and you can know if you watch the show, like, I don't promote my services really on this show. I don't even really promote them online. It's mostly word of mouth. But this guy promotes. So this guy obviously is getting more people just by virtue of that, and they're getting rooked. And it's, to me, it's painful, because what it does is, and as we just discussed, the vast majority of these people are con artists or don't know what they're talking about, or victimizing screenwriters. And if you're a screenwriter who's trying to figure out how to navigate all this, I get it if you're upset. Anecdotally, a few weeks ago at the beginning of the year, in the screenwriting group that I'm in, I just posted, the fact that, hey, it's me. I don't do this very often, but, for people who haven't seen anything about me, I do offer these services. No sooner do I do that than a couple of jokers get in the thread and start trolling the hell out of me. These are people who don't know anything about the business, obviously, but are people who really got victimized by the con artist version of a script consultant, somebody who basically was victimized, and they're pissed. So in their mind, it's like somebody who just got dumped by a girl who now hates all girls. So they were attacking me, attacking my, calling me a fraud or a liar or whatever it is. And again, it's like, I worked where I work. I have, endorsements and recommendations from literally the biggest people in the entertainment world, the biggest producers, the single biggest screenwriters. And these two poor souls felt so embittered by their experiences that they were just attacking me mercilessly. And again, on the one hand, I'm like sitting back going like, "Oi, what do you do about people like this?" And like, the other thing, if you're somebody who's inclined to do this, don't ever do that in a public forum. Business is very small. People do talk. By doing that, all you're really doing is you're lighting yourself on fire. because I didn't know these people from Adam. I'm a complete stranger to them. But once you do that, and once you get on people's radar, you destroyed any chance that you're going to have in the business.
I
Don't
like
ever. It's crazy.
I rarely get into these things, but when it happens,
Yeah.
I try to kill them with kindness. They're like,
Yeah. I mean, well, or
they're
not
like, you're
engage
an
at all.
idiot. And I'm like, I'll try to be hard. I'll try to think smarter. And then they're like, I'm confused.
The thing is, most of those kind of people, they just want the oxygen and the attention, which I guess I get, and I completely understand that. But it underscored for me the importance of this, which is the only I don't need to do the consulting thing. What I'm doing it because like I got pissed the amount of people like Coach Blank Screenwriting Academy and the attendant websites who were just ripping people off who were genuinely looking for feedback and guidance from professionals who could potentially help them improve their material and give them an insider perspective, give them the real, the real information. Look, like I said, I'm not the cheapest guy on the block because my time is limited. But yes, like Lukas said, there are people who read your script for $5 or $10. There are people who will give you coverage for $50. I don't know who the hell they are. They don't work in the business. Most of the time, their feedback is 50-50 at best. But that's the difference, which is 99% of the people out there who people, utilize are those people who are absolutely not going to help your career. Absolutely not going to help open doors for you. Absolutely are going to just kind of take your money and run because it's easy enough to do that.
Want to
If
talk?
you're going to, oh, hold on. Let me just finish this. If you're ever going to do this, and I'm not saying this for me, forget me. If you're ever going to do this, if you're ever going to, employ a service or hire somebody to help you, find out who they are, where they've worked, who recommends them, what they've actually done in the business. Now, the internet, you have to do a little bit of searching and you have to do a little bit of research because if you just go to one thing, one of these trolls were just like, well, I went to IMDb and where were you in IMDb? Okay, I'm a development executive for Jerry Bruckheimer. Those credits are not in IMDb. That's for screenwriters. Yes, and I've written professional screenplays before, but IMDb is notoriously incomplete. They're not all in there. I've been, an uncredited script doctor on major films. Those credits are not in IMDb. So if your only experience, this is like thinking about COVID because you went on a couple of sites that well, Dr. Jones, who's like nobody's ever heard of and is not an epidemiologist, says that you don't need to get a COVID shot. Great, that's a problem if you're like using that as your one example of like, well, I don't see him on IMDb, or like, fine, do a little bit more research. It's not that hard. My credits are literally on the movie. Just fast forward to the end of Top Gun Maverick, and you can see my name, and you can see my credit, and you can see what I've done. But again, they're not going to be like armchair detectives if their only goal is to go out there and vent because they got pissed off that other ripoff artists victimized them. I am really sorry that those guys went through that. Most people don't do the research. I'm just saying, if you're going to do the research and you're going to hire somebody, do it and make sure that you're not hiring some anonymous stranger whose opinion doesn't matter. It's easy to do that, but just expect to be ripped off then. Anyway, I've said my piece. That's my rant.
Well,
just do your homework. Just do your homework.
So I was one time on Reddit. I posted like a draft of the script for feedback. Bad idea. They're awful people.
Yeah.
So somebody like has all this really weird criticism of it, and like private messages me when I'm talking to the guy, and I could tell from his comments that like he's just crazy.
Yeah.
And terrible. And he claims to be like a well-paid ghostwriter and offers me his ghostwriting services to fix it.
That's great.
I was like, all right, bro, what's your credits? And like,
Right.
he wouldn't tell me. I was like, he wouldn't tell me anything. It's all secret. I was like, what's your name? Wouldn't tell me. It's all secret. Okay. Like I clicked on his Reddit handle to see what else he had posted. And it was like screenwriting, religious fanaticism, screenwriting. I was like, okay. All right, great.
All right.
So I say, he tells me like his rate sheet, more or less. I say emphatically, no, thank you. And then he starts attacking me. And I'm like, oh gosh, sorry to waste your time. And then he threatens if I don't, like, I don't even know what he was demanding at this point, but he threatens to go and harass me or tell all of the internet what an idiot I am. And I write, please do. It's great publicity. And he's like, I'm serious. I'll do it. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. I
Wow.
never hear from him. The next day, there's one troll on my Instagram account, which nobody looks at, talking about what a jerk I am.
Okay.
I hit flag and delete, and then I never hear from this guy again.
It happens.
What a weird hobby.
Well, again, I get it, because if you were somebody who is desperate to break in and doesn't, and thinks it's all rigged against you, and frankly, it is really hard to break through. It's almost designed that the only people who are ever going to be able to break through are the people who have that kind of like patience, persistence, and talent, that they're just willing to bang their head against the wall until the scar tissue is like, the size of a frying pan. But I get it. I get the frustration. I do. I guess what I'm trying to convey to people out there is sort of like, try to keep your frustration to yourself. Don't vent it in a public forum where your name is attached to it, where people are going to like,
Why
what's
don't
that?
you analyze it and put it in a movie?
Yes, exactly.
Figure out your own humanity and use that. Nobody cares about your
Right.
$2 million fantasy movie about planet, Gavorgon with the little creatures that nobody cares. It's just
And this is the reason why it's so hard to break in, because again, a lot of aspiring writers will say, well, there's all these great screenplays out there, but no, they'll only read screenplays from their friends or from people who have already broken in or whatever it is. It's like, but all those people started out never having written a screenplay before. You still have to write material.
usually you can tell when people are talented. You can just
Yeah.
tell.
B, you realize that, like I just said, for the 32 years that I worked for Jerry, every day was a tidal wave of material that we had to get through. And those were from people we kind of recognized as professional managers or agents or attorneys. If we opened the door literally and said, yeah, you know what? Anybody can send in a paragraph, a treatment, a screenplay, a verbal pitch. It's like hundreds of thousands of people. There is not enough man hours in the day to get through that, which is the reason why over time these sort of channels developed to weed through the material. So, ostensibly only the best material would get through to us. I'm telling you right now, even stuff that's coming through the professional agents and managers and stuff, it ain't all great. But at the very least, usually it's professionally executed. But because of people like the trolls I mentioned that were in that thread, there are some people who, have a serious axe to grind or are a little unstable, and you just can't risk, kind of getting involved in that, because then they feel like, you owe them something, and then it's no good deed goes unpunished. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Lukas and I can both, again, identify with that, because once upon a time, we'd never written a script. We didn't even know what a screenplay format looked like. So we read and we wrote endlessly, and we met friends who also wanted to write, and we watched millions of movies, and we just, we just wrote script after script after script. And over time, the people who were meant to succeed eventually will, if you write something that's good enough, and then you'll get in the system. But if you just, are looking for the fast path, there is no fast path. If you're looking for the secret magic bullet book or, screenwriting program or teacher, there is no any of those things. But there is a spectrum of people you can potentially work with, and it varies from the person on Fiverr who's literally some guy who likes to read screenplays to somebody like me who's developed billion-dollar franchises whose time is limited. So as I said, I'm not cheap, but that's because, again, I don't have all the time in the world. I'm also writing. So like when I do take clients on, it takes a full day for me. I don't know about other people, but like, I have to read a screenplay, usually reread the screenplay, make notes, actually sit down with the person and talk. It's a full day of my life when I'm reading a screenplay. So it's like the idea of like, well, how come you can't do that, how come you can't do that for like $10 or for free or for $100? It's like, well, I would never do it to the person who has the tone like you just mentioned. I would do it to a friend. I would do it to somebody who's a friend of a friend or who's nice or respectful. But some disgruntled stranger who's like swinging out on the internet, not only will I not read your material, but now anybody I know will never read your material because I'll share this story and tell them your name because you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have lashed out like that. Be nice, be respectful. That's how you meet strangers online or, at the coffee shop or something like that. If you're a good guy and you're normal and you don't expect anything and you're not entitled and you don't have an attitude, you'd be surprised what you can do.
There was a woman who got her script she has no agent, no manager, and she got her script on the Real Blacklist last year.
Wow. That's amazing. And I'm sure it was great. And I'm sure she was very nice and very humble.
She was just somebody who she just did her own networking. It's awesome.
And worked really hard. And Lukas is right. And I've told the story of when I was in college trying to get a filmmaker to come to my school before there was an internet. It was like, I don't know, I just kind of figured it out and I was nice about it and I wasn't a jerk and it worked and it opened doors and it helped me. But boy, if you're going out there just like firing bullets at strangers online,
most people don't.
Yeah.
By and large, most people are. I find that they're nice. I mean, there's more
people are
on Reddit where people just downvote things. Like there's got to be a bunch of dudes, and I'm sure it's men who are just like relentlessly downvoting everything just to be like,
right.
On Facebook, people tend to be very well behaved. And
well, again, the funny thing is, like, again, everybody's respectful. 99% of people are. And then there's 1% that just goes out of their way to nettle you and needle you. And it's just like, I'm ignoring all the nice people. Why is this person being such a jerk? But you don't want to encourage them.
I've gotten into it with some semi-professional people.
Oh, yeah.
I got banned by Script Pipeline because I was working about something.
And I don't even know what Script Pipeline is. So
they're another one of those companies.
Another one of these.
Oh wait, this is why the First Amendment is so great. I hate Script Pipeline. I can't, if I say why, I could get in trouble. But there's nothing anybody can do if I just say I hate them.
So it's another service where writers can have their material evaluated and graded and
They're the ones who admitted that they don't read all the scripts in their screenplay contests.
Well, I don't know Script Pipeline, but I can assure you that the studio executives and development executives are probably not looking at it. I haven't heard
but
of
if you spend $100, you think somebody's going to do it.
Again, yeah, you want that to
And if they don't, they should put on their website that they don't. The guy was he was pinned down in an interview and he sounded like Paul Manafort. Well, that's what they said.
Anyway,
you colluding with Russia? Well, I don't know. They could say that.
But if you want to, for a moment, we can talk about like what we're just, working on in kind of vague terms professionally. I know Lukas is right. Lukas has got a TV show that he's working on, and he's like literally doing what we're talking about, which is reaching out to people and being very nice and getting professionals to respond to his material, some of which has resulted in putting together a package, which is kind of amazing. And he's doing it without professional representation.
Yes, and I'm super nice. And then I get on this little talk show and I lay down all these career time bombs for these people if they ever want. Oh my God.
Yeah, and so Lukas has got all that going on, and I'm working on a TV pilot, and developing 2 or 3 features with feature producers, and I'm currently engaged in a real interesting matter, which I'm not going to discuss, but it could be very interesting as it's developing in the background. I'll keep you posted as it's time to share the information. But
all right, we got to bounce, Charlie.
This has been great. This is fun. I'm glad that we had a chance to get back into this for the new year, and hopefully we'll be a little more frequent than we've been. But
your guest.
Oh yeah. Okay. So on an upcoming show, and if you guys have any entertainment questions, legal questions, We're going to have a good friend of mine, Bob Kaplan, who's a legendary entertainment attorney, taught entertainment law at the American Film Institute for decades. Is going to be the guest on the show. So we would like to solicit some legal questions. You guys must have them. Put them in the comments section below, and we're going to ask Bob some of your questions. So you're going to get it straight from the horse's mouth and without his $700 an hour charge. And so, yeah, it'll be a lot of fun to do that. He's a fascinating character and has great war stories. And I think that'll be great, right?
Yeah, cool.
That'd be a lot of fun. So thank you.
Okay.
Happy 2023, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, see you soon. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, audience.
Thanks.
Disclaimer, I'm not this terrible a person.
Take care.
Bye-bye.